Good morning, sir.
So can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
fine. So this is what, yes.
Yes, sir.
So this is what we were discussing in the last class. That is the CPI, the clock cycle per instruction, is a good metric to evaluate the performance of the CPU. And what we have seen, the answer is both yes and no, and it depends all on the clock rate. Now, it is yes if the clock rate is fixed, and it is no if the clocks if the processor are running at a different the clock rate. Now, the next question is, can the clock cycle per instruction be less than one? That means when you say the clock cycle per instructions, the number of clock cycle in instruction is going to take, what, or the average number of clock cycle the instruction is going to take, can this clock cycle per instruction be less than one? Yes, the answer is also yes. This is possible in a superscalar architecture. Now, we'll discuss on the superscalar architectures. In a superscalar architecture, if you issue multiple instructions per clock cycle. Now, look at whatever you discussed until now for a uniprocessor, where a single instruction is issued in every clock cycle. Now, in a superscalar architecture, in every clock cycle, you issue multiple number of instructions. So when multiple number of instructions are issued, then the multiple number of instruction, they also gets complete in every clock cycle. So the clock cycle per instruction can also be less than the one. Now let's look at is this Amdahl's law that we have discussed for the uniprocessor system. Can this law be applicable to a multiprocessor system? So when we talk about the multiprocessor system, we have n number of processor, and a given program is parallelized or a partition so that it can be executed in a n number of processor. And is this Amdahl's law can be applied to a multiprocessor system? So let's compute the speed up that you can gain in a multiprocessor system using the Amdahl's law. Let T be the total execution time of a program in a uniprocessor workstation, or in uniprocessor system. The program takes T amount of time, and I want to execute the same program in a multiprocessor system. Now, when you execute any given program in a multiprocessor system, then you need to parallelize the program, or you need to partition the program, so that a parallel execution can be done in multiple number of nodes. So let the program be parallelized or a partition for parallel execution on a cluster of many processing nodes. So let's take n number of processing nodes are there, and we want to execute that particular program after partitioning or parallelizing among the n nodes. Now, assume that a fraction of the code must be executed sequentially, and we call this as a sequential bottleneck. Look at even if we execute a program in a multiprocessor system, the result from each of the node need to be aggregated. So there has to be a certain fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially, and let alpha be the fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially, and we call this is a sequential bottleneck. You cannot, given any program or given any task, it cannot be 100% parallelized. There has to be a certain fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially, and that fraction, at least, it will contain the aggregation of the result from all the n nodes. Alpha with the fraction of the code, then alpha 1 minus alpha of the code can be compiled for parallel execution by n processor. So let's come. So the fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially is alpha, and 1 minus alpha is the fraction of the code that can be parallelized, that can be compiled for parallel execution. Then that 1 minus alpha is executed in n processor. Now let's. So what will be the time to execute this particular code in n processor? So the total execution time of the program in the n processor we can now compute is, look at alpha is the fraction of the code that executed sequentially, and sequential execution takes t amount of time. So to execute this fraction of the code, it will take alpha t. Now the in the sequential execution, the remaining code in the sequential execution, it takes 1 minus alpha into t. This is the time it takes in sequential execution, and if that code is executed in n processor, so it will take 1 minus alpha into t divided by n. So this will be the total execution time of the program if I execute in a n processor. Then let's compute the speed up. So what is the speed up? The speed up, we know the speed up is the execution time old divided by the execution time the new. So in this case, the execution time is old is the sequential execution. So let me write execution sequential divided by execution parallel. So sequential execution by parallel execution, then the sequential time to the execution time in sequential is t, and execution time in parallel is alpha t plus 1 minus alpha into t divided by n. So let's compute the speed up. So this is what he says, the execution time in sequential divided by the execution time in the parallel. So if you look at in the numerator and denominator, there is a component t, so we can cancels out this component. So it will reduce to 1 divided by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n. And if I further make certain simplification, so it becomes n divided by n plus alpha plus 1 minus alpha. So that is the speed up that we can obtain by executing the program in n number of processor. So what will be the maximum speed up that you can obtain? So the maximum speed up that you can obtain is if alpha is 0. So if the alpha, if this 0, so what is alpha? Alpha is a sequential bottleneck. That means the fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially. If there is no fraction of the code that must be executed sequentially, then we obtain a maximum speed up of n, and that is what that is the maximum speed up that you can obtain if you are using a multiple processor. So the maximum speed up of n is achieved only if the sequential bottleneck alpha is reduced to 0, or the code is fully parallelized with alpha equal to 0. So if there is no sequential bottleneck, or if the code is fully parallelized, then the speed up that we obtained is equal to n, where n is the number of the processor, or the number of processing unit where the program is being executed. So next we'll discuss on a topic called instruction set architecture. So next we'll discuss something on instruction architecture. We'll discuss on the classification of the instruction set architecture. Now, what is the instruction set architecture? So we have discussed that the instruction set architecture is a portion of the computer that is visible to the programmer, or they compile or write out. Now, if you look at if you look at this diagram, this a instruction set. There is a instruction set, and this instruction set, this act as an interface between the software and the hardware, or we can say it's a somewhere in the interface between the program and the machine. Now, the instruction set architecture has been defined as a contract between the software and hardware, or between the program and the machine. So if you look at it, somewhere in between the software and the hardware, or between the program and the machine. That means there is a one layer that exists between the software and hardware, or the program and the machine. And because the existence of this layer, your program can be developed, or the software can be developed independently of the hardware, and the hardware can develop independently of the program. So program and machine can be developed independently. It's act as a contract between these two, the program and the machine. Then both can be developed independently. You can develop a program independent of your machine, and the machine can be developed independent of the program. Now, the program can be developed that target the ISA without requiring the knowledge of the actual machine implementation. So let's look at, you had a program. No programmer knows the underlying architecture, underlying machine implementation is not required. It's because there is a layer in between, and that layer facilitates a programmer to develop his program without requiring to know the actual machine implementation. Then machine can be designed that implements the instruction set architecture without concerning for what the program will run on them. So what he says, a programmer need not have to know the machine implementation, and he can develop the program so that the program can execute on the target instruction set architecture. And the machine designer, they can design the machine without bothering that what type of program is going to run on them, because at the end of the day, the program is written that will be targeted to instruction set architecture, and the machine that is being designed is designed for a particular instruction set architecture. Now, this instruction set architecture also ensures software portability. Now, when you talk, what is the software portability? Now, when you say the software portability, it's a program written for a particular instruction set architecture can run all implementation of that instruction set architecture. Now, you say we are talking of a instruction set architecture, and we are talking of many implementation of the instruction set architecture. That means you given an instruction set architecture, there can be a multiple implementation of that instruction set architecture, or given an instruction set architecture, multiple implementation of instruction set architecture over a period of time, possibly, or in a given period of time, there can be two different simultaneous implementation of a instruction set architecture possible. A instruction set architecture is not changed frequently. However, there is a development of the instruction set architecture over a period of time. So a given given a instruction set architecture, then there can be a many implementation of the instruction set architecture, and any program written for a particular instruction set architecture should able to run on all the implementation for that instruction set architecture. The instruction set architecture tends to evolve very slowly. The reason being that if you change your instruction set architecture, then whatever the program you have written your program, then the program is targeted for a particular instruction set architecture. Now, if you change your instruction set architecture, then you need to recompile your entire program so that it can be run on the new instruction set architecture, or you need to redevelop your program so that it's run on the new instruction set architecture. That is why the instruction set architecture is not changed. Rather, there is some development on this particular instruction set architecture takes place when an application needs a new feature. Then the new feature gets added up into the instruction set architecture rather than going for a new instruction set architecture. The given an existing instruction set architecture, then an extension to the existing instruction architecture can occur from time to time to accommodate the new or emerging applications. The introduction of a new instructions architecture is usually not done. This is because you need to invest heavily on the developing the software if you are changing a instruction architecture to a new instruction architecture. Now, the program portability also reduces the cost of software development and increases the longevity of the software. So, look at the instructions architecture provides the software portability, so it reduces the cost of the software development. That means if given a software, you need not have, if you develop a software, you need not have to change the software because your underlying instructions architecture is not going to change, and the software will remain for a longer period of time in the market. Now, this particular feature, that the portability, also it comes with a certain problem. That the problem is that if you are developing a new instruction set architecture, then all the programs that we have written for a given instruction set architecture, that has to be migrated to the new instructions architecture, which is not which cannot be done so easily without recompiling the entire program to the new instruction set architecture, or you redesigning the program for the new instruction set architecture. This is what say the software portability also makes the migration to a new instruction set architecture, it's very difficult, because migrating to a new architecture means recompile or redesign your entire program to fit into the new instruction set architecture. Now, all the successful instruction set architecture, or more specifically the instruction set architecture with a large software install base, tend to stay around for a while. That means if a instruction set architecture on which there is a large amount of software is already developed, that is going to remain in the market for a long period of time, otherwise the entire software which are developed for a specific instruction architecture need to be recompiled or redesigned for the new instruction set architecture. That is the reason why the instruction set architecture are not changed often. Only if an application needs a certain new feature, then some extensions are made to the existing instruction architecture so that all the programs can run on the extension version of the existing instruction set architecture. For example, the IBM 360 or 370, it's still if the IBM uses this one, or the Intel IA 32-bit architecture is still existing. So the instruction architecture is not changed, it's remained static for a longer period of time. Now, the instruction set architecture, it also serves as the specification for the processor design. Look at when the designer says to know the instruction that what architectures, instruction architecture, what is the specification of the instruction set architecture. Once he knows the specification, or once he knows the instruction set architecture, then he can start designing the instruction set, designing the machine. We have discussed something called architecture, that is called the micro architecture, and that is called the implementation. The architecture is what is the visible to the programmer or the compile writer. For example, the instruction format, addressing modes, the length of the instructions. These are all visible to the programmers. If I write an assembly language program, then I have to know everything. Then this microarchitecture is the implementation of, the microarchitecture is the organization of it. Now your instruction set architecture says that I need a multiplier. Now how this multiplication is to be implemented is a part of the microarchitecture. The microarchitecture message that for a multiplication you can have a separate multiplier unit, or it can say that the multiplication can be performed by a repetitive addition. So once the instruction set is specified, then the microarchitecture decides how do you are going to realize the instruction set architecture. Then finally the implementation is the finally how we're going to build the chip. So the microprocessor designers, they starts with a instruction set architecture and produce a microarchitecture that meets these specifications. Say we had an instruction set architecture, then to realize the instruction set architecture, you have to find out what is the corresponding microarchitecture that will realize the instruction set architecture. That is what I gave with the example with a multiplier. So if the instruction set architecture says there is a multiplication instruction, then to realize the multiplication instruction, whether I should have a separate multiplier unit or I'll go for addition operation. Now, if we have a separate multiplication unit, so you had another implementation and you had a repetitive addition, though you had a different implementation, and look at the same instruction set architecture with different implementation will have a different performance. Now, every new microarchitecture must be validated against the instruction set architecture. Look at, there can be a multiple microarchitecture for a given instruction set architecture. So every new microarchitecture that you propose to implement a given instruction architecture, that must be validated against that instruction set architecture to ensure that it performs the functional requirements specified by the instruction set architecture. Look at, your all programs have written for a target instruction set architecture. Now you're developing a new microarchitecture for that particular instruction set architecture, for which there is a large number of softwares are already being built and running on the instruction set architecture. Now if you are changing the microarchitecture, then you need to validate whether that microarchitecture is going to fulfill all the functionality of a given instruction set architecture. Now, if the new microarchitecture cannot perform some functionality of a given instruction set architecture, then any program that needs that particular functionality will if a functionality is needed by any program, then it will no more be available. Then if it is no more available, then that particular program cannot run on the instruction set architecture. So it's very critical to validate and ensure that the new microarchitecture performs all the functional requirement as specified by the instruction set architecture. And longer the instruction set architecture has been in existence, the larger is the install base, the software install base on that instruction architecture, and it will be more difficult to replace that instruction set architecture. So longer period it stays, then more number of the software it has been developed for that instruction set architecture. So it is very difficult to replace that instruction set architecture. And it is being observed, it is also reported that the development of a effective compiler and an operating system for a new instruction architecture can take an order of decades. So imagine you are replacing a new existing instruction architecture by a new instruction set architecture, then you need a compiler and you need a operating system. Then development of the developing a effective compiler and operating system for the new instructions architecture takes an order of decades. So you cannot wait for such a longer period of time to develop a compiler or OS for a new instruction set architecture. That's the reason why the existing instruction in the existing instruction set architecture, new features are added rather than they are replaced by a new instruction set architecture. So this must be validated to ensure that the existing software can run correctly on the new microarchitecture. So the validation is when moment you develop a new microarchitecture, a validation has to be done against the instruction set architecture for which we develop a new microarchitecture, so that all the existing software can run correctly on the new microarchitecture. If the new microarchitecture does not support some feature, then the all the existing software may not run on the new microarchitecture because some of the features are not available. So this needs to be ensured that the microarchitecture that we have developed for an instruction architecture must support all the features of all the functional requirements of the instruction set architecture. Now, next we'll discuss something called a dynamic and static interface. Now, what we have discussed that the instruction set architecture support or provides two critical role. One of them is it provides a contract between the software and hardware. So as it provides a contract between the software and hardware, you can develop the program and the machine independently. So it because it provides a contract between the software and hardware, this facilitates the independent development of program and the machine. This is one role. The other role, it says that the instruction set architecture serves is the specification for a microprocessor design. So first is the instruction set architecture. Given a instruction set architecture, then you find out the corresponding microarchitecture to implement the given instruction set architecture. So once you have the microarchitecture, then finally you go for the implementation of it or the realization of the microarchitecture so that you can realize the given instruction set architecture. So you, so all implementation must meet the requirement and support the functionality specified by the instruction set architecture. So these two critical role it provides. One, it acts as a contract. The other one, it serve as a specification for the microprocessor design. Besides these two, it also provides an important role that inherent in the definition of every instruction set architecture is an associated definition of an interface called dynamic static interface. Now, what does the dynamic and static interface does? That this dynamic and static interface separates what is done statically at compile time versus what is done dynamically at runtime. So the DSI provides an interface that means it separates out between what you do at a runtime and what you do at a compiler, or what can be done in a runtime and what can be done during the compile time, so that a optimization can be done. Now, traditionally, so this is what the so about the dynamic and static interface. So it acts as a interface between, if you look at the program and the machine, the software and the hardware. So the DSI specifies that what can be done at compile time and what can be done at runtime. If you are doing it at compile time, that means it's something you are doing statically, and if you are doing something in the runtime, that means it is done dynamically. So it separates it what can be done statically by the compiler versus what it can be dynamically done at the runtime. Eh, Traditionally, all tasks and optimizations done in the static domain at compile time. So all task and optimization done in the static domain at compile times involves the software and compiler and are considered above the DSI, or it's considered above the dynamic and static interface. So what is it? If you do any optimization at a compile time using the compiler, then you do it above the DSI. Conversely, all tasks and optimization done in the dynamic domain at runtime involve the hardware and are considered below the DSI. So if any optimization is done at optimization is done in the static domain, then it needs the software and the compiler. So these are done above the DSI. And if you are doing any optimization in the dynamic domain at runtime, it involves the hardware. So if you are doing an optimization during the runtime, that means you need a hardware to perform the optimization. So uh, this optimization or the optimization that is done dynamically are done below the DSI. So it separates out that if you are performing any if you are performing any operation in the static domain, then do it above the DSI. And if you are performing any operations or any optimization in the dynamic domain, then you do it below the DSI. So the DSI separates out what can be done at the compile time and what can be done at the runtime.
Sir,
Yes.
so what does it mean by above the DSI and below the DSI in this
So
context?
if you look at, there is a interface here. There is an interface here, right?
Yes.
And above this interface, I call it above the DSI. I do not know what is above the what is there above the DSI. And if I do it the below the DSI, then I am calling this one the below the DSI. Now let's look at. I want to do the optimization, right? I want to optimize my program, and the program optimization is done in the compile time. Now, if you are doing in the compile time, then you do in that means you are doing in the static domain. So DSI separates between the static domain and the dynamic domain. So anything that optimizes, any optimization that you want to perform in the static domain must be placed above the DSI, and any optimization that you want to perform in the dynamically at runtime, that must be placed below the DSI. So if we are performing above the DSI, so it says you are uh, exposing certain feature, exposing to the software. Look at what we have discussed. We talked about we had an architecture. To realize that architecture, there is a micro architecture. Now, certain features of the micro architecture may get exposed. So we look at in the subsequently, there is one more slide are there. There are certain features which are gets exposed, which are there in the DSI, which are below the DSI in one instruction set architecture. It goes above the DSI in another instruction set architecture or another implementation of the same instruction set architecture. So it get exposed once it goes above the DSI, it get exposed to the hardware, and those are below, they are hidden into the hardware. And if it is above the DSI, then it involves the compiler complexity, and it is below the DSI, then it involves the hardware complexity. So it's more important where you are going to place now the DSI. So the software development can take place above the DSI independent of the development of the microarchitecture feature below the DSI. So look at uh, the software development and the hardware development, they can take place independently. So you need to place, now I can place the DSI in a place such that the software development can take place independently of the underlying microarchitecture. So you can keep on changing the microarchitecture maybe for a better performance. So you're changing the microarchitecture, always you get a better performance. Otherwise, there's no point of changing your microarchitecture. The example that I gave, that the multiplication. So there can be a floating point operation. So you can have a different floating point module to increase the performance of the floating point operation or the performance of the entire the machine. So so where do we place? So all the architecture features are specified in the instruction set architecture, and and therefore exposed to the software above the DSI in the static domain. So it says all architecture features are specified in the instruction set architecture, and they are exposed to the software above the DSI in the static domain. So those architectural features are placed above the DSI, and all the implementation features of the microarchitecture are below the DSI and operate in the dynamic domain at the runtime. So we talked about architecture, we talked about the microarchitecture, and we talked about the implement. Look at implementation is physically a physical implementation that has to be below the DSI. So all the architectures or your instruction set architecture is exposed to the software. So they are above the DSI, and your implementation of your microarchitecture is below the DSI, and that operates in the dynamic domain. And if it is below the DSI, they are usually, these are completely hidden from the software and the compiler in the static domain. So let's look at, we talked about a instruction set architecture, and there can be a many version of the microarchitecture corresponding to a given instruction set architecture. So there can be a development of many microarchitecture for a given instruction set architecture. So that microarchitecture must be hidden from the software development. So they are usually hidden from the software development and the compiler in the static domain. So it must be below the DSI. So one key design issue, a key issue in the design of a instruction set architecture is the placement of the DSI. So where do I place the DSI? Now this placement of the DSI is correlated with the decision of what is to place above the DSI and what is to place below the DSI. Look at, once you place the DSI, then you have to find out what you can place above the DSI so that it get exposed to the software, and what need to place the below the DSI so that it is written hidden from the software. Now between the application program written in a high level language at the top and the actual hardware of the machine at the bottom. So we are separating out now to a top, there is a interface in between. We call now that interface that separating is between the software and hardware is a DSI. Then in between the application program written in a high level language at the top and the actual hardware of the machine at the bottom, there can be different level of abstraction where the DSI can potentially be placed. So it says that between the high level between the program written in the high level language and the actual hardware of the machine, there can be a different level of abstraction where the DSI can potentially be placed, and this placement of DSI is correlated with the decision of what to be placed above the DSI and what to be placed below the DSI. For example, you look at, we talked about the performance optimization. The performance can be achieved through optimization that are carried out above the DSI by the compiler, as well as through optimizations that are performed below the DSI in the microarchitecture. So we want to improve the performance. Now the performance can be improved through optimization at statically and optimization dynamically. Both we are optimizing statically. You can optimize at the compile time, as well as dynamically you can optimize at the runtime. So optimization is done above the DSI, which is done during the compile time, and optimization is also done below the DSI at the microarchitecture level. Now then, where do I place the DSI? That means in such scenario, ideally the DSI should be placed at a level that achieves the best combination of compiler complexity and hardware complexity to obtain the desired performance. So if you look at in the previous one, there is a compiler complexity and there is a hardware complexity. So you look at that, where to place the DSI. We exploit how much, we're looking at how much we are going to exploit the hardware complexity, or how much we're going to exploit the compiler complexity for the placement of the DSI. Now this shows the some abstract level where the DSI can be the place. Now the DSI can be placed at a different level. For example, the Mike Flynn in 1983 has proposed placing the DSI very high and doing everything below the DSI, such that a program written in high level language can be directly executed by a directly executable language machine. So what is the Flink's proposal? If Flink's proposal is put the DSI at a very higher level, that means any program written in the high level language can directly executed by a directly executable language machine. Now let's look at what the CISC and the RISC does. A complex instruction set computer, ISA, places the DSI at the assembly language or the microcode level. So there is another level where the CISC plays. Now if you look at where this space, this is there at the high level language level, where everything is written high level language that can be executed by a directly executable language machine. Now CISC says something. CISC says that you place the DSI at the assembly language or the microcode level. So there is a different level of at the DSI is placed. Now look at, now when you place, so what is this one below this? These are the microarchitecture, and above the DSI is the architecture, instruction set architecture. So that is exposed to the software, and these are hidden from the software. Now let's look at what the RISC does. If you look at RISC, a reduced instruction set computer, instruction set architecture lowers the DSI and expect to perform more optimization above the DSI via the compiler. Now let's look at it as goes in the DSI is placed much below. Now when it is placed much below, you are lowering the DSI. Now if you are lowering the DSI, look at, let me take the CISC. Now if you are lowering the DSI, some of the microarchitecture which was if you are lowering the DSI, then some of the microarchitecture get exposed to the software, and those once it gets exposed to the software, then we can do the optimization during the compile time. So lowering the DSI allows for doing the optimization at the compile time. So the DSI provides an important separation between the architecture and implementation, and the violation of the separation can become the problematic. So now, there is another problem associated with the DSI, that as the instructions look at, there can be evolution of the instruction set architecture. As the instruction set architecture evolves and the extensions are added, the placement of the DSI is also implicitly shifted. Now, once you changing the placement of the DSI from one level to the another level, so let's look at, let's take an example that this was the original RISC. Then so your DSI is placed at this level. So these are the microarchitecture features. These are hidden to the programmer. Now let's say there is there is some evolution of the instruction set architecture for the RISC takes place, or the microarchitecture evolution takes place. Then the DSI is placed slightly below now. So when it lowered this, the microarchitecture which was hidden to the software now gets exposed to the software. So once it gets exposed to the software, then you can do more optimization. That is why the RISC places the DSI at a much lower level, so that most of the optimization can be done at the during the compile time. So next class we'll discuss some of the characteristics of the instruction set architecture and the different classification of the instruction set architecture. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. You have another 2 to 3 minutes left with me.
Sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You explained DSI. So, I mean, I just confirming if I understood correctly. Say, if we are lowering DSI, it makes the program will be more efficient because we will be optimizing it properly. And
Right.
if we are making it upwards, then it will be more portable because the internal details of the architecture are hidden from the external sources. Is
Right.
that right, sir?
No, the first part is absolutely correct. The second part is
Okay, sir.
whether you lower the DSI or keep the DSI, the portability has to be always be there. That ensures. That means if
Then,
you
sir, what is the purpose of placing the DSI higher? Otherwise, if we are optimizing the program by placing it lower, then we should always place it lower. Why should we put it upwards?
look at what does the CISC does. The CISC has a very interesting feature. Look at in a CISC, the DSI is a much higher level. This is it's the assembly language or the microcode level. Now you need, if you want to perform certain optimization, then you have to do all your optimization during the hard time at a runtime. And doing a optimization runtime is not so easy. You need to have an enormous amount of the hardware to do a optimization at the hardware level. So if you are exposing certain microarchitecture to the software, then you can do the optimization of the microarchitecture software level, which is much easier. The compiler optimization is much easier than doing a optimization at the runtime.
Sir,
I understood that, but my question is, why should I put it higher? Because I think placing it lower is always better. Then why does CISC put it
That is, look at, there are many flaws. You look at, if you slightly go back to the history, the people have tried to change the instruction set architecture. The moment you change the instruction set architecture, they found that the entire software base has to be changed. Then they realize that the instruction set architecture cannot be placed. So when the CISC was recent designed, they thought of placing it placing it much above. So that is what the initially they thought. They later on found that it's not possible to do many optimization at higher level. So better it to take it down. So that is what the RISC uses.
Yes,
So
sir,
these
I
are
understood. I understood. Means like if we place it lower, then over the time the architecture will change. Then the older software cannot run in the new architecture. If we hide the
no.
details, then
If you are completely changing the architecture, then the old software cannot run. Absolutely correct. So the architectures are never changed. A new features are added so that the old software can also run on the new architecture. For example, if you look at the Intel uses one extension called MMX extension. Probably we'll discuss somewhere in the MMX extension. So it came somewhere in around 2000 or maybe in the first half of 2005 around. A new extension comes up. So the old software which are developed for x86 processor, they also runs it, but they may not be able to use the new feature, newly added feature into the instruction set architecture.
So according to you, what is better, placing the DSI at DSI 1 level or at DSI 3 level?
So which one? These are
Sir,
all an abstraction. You look at level 1, level 2, all these are an abstraction,
yes, sir.
right? So it simply says that this abstraction says that if you look at the RISC says you expose many of your microarchitecture to the software level for optimization.
Yes, sir. Sir, so which is better?
The RISC, if you look at the RISC performs much better than the CISC.
Okay, that's what we are.
So you can leave the team and join the next class.